I've always been the kind of person who prefers working late to avoid traffic. My office was on the 14th floor of a commercial building downtown, and even though I hated the solitude of an almost empty floor after 8 p.m., I enjoyed the peace and quiet to finish my tasks. At the time, I was 29 years old and trying to impress my boss to land a promotion. I arrived early and left late. The building was modern and well lit, but the underground parking lot, that place gave me chills. I always hated the smell of damp concrete and the eerie echo of my own footsteps down there. But in the end, it was just a parking garage, right? At least, that's what I thought. The first time I noticed that man was on a Tuesday. I went down around 10 p.m. exhausted and saw a silhouette leaning against one of the pillars near the exit. He had his head down, fiddling with his phone, and was wearing a worn-out gray jacket. I didn't pay much attention at the time. It wasn't unusual for other employees to stay late, and maybe he was just waiting for an Uber or something. But the next night, he was there again. Same clothes, same position, but this time without a phone. It seemed like he was waiting for something or someone. I walked past him without looking too much, but I felt that spine-chilling sensation you get when you realize you're being watched. On the third night, I started feeling genuinely uneasy. When I stepped out of the elevator, I made sure to scan my surroundings before heading to my car. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for my car and two others scattered across the space. But he was there. Same posture, same jacket, only this time a little closer to my path. I walked quickly, gripping my keys tightly. I passed him, trying to ignore him, but when I unlocked my car, that primal instinct kicked in. Don't get in yet. I waited a few seconds, slowly opened the door, and glanced at him from the corner of my eye. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching me. I got in my car and drove off quickly without looking back. The next morning, when I got to the parking lot, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Tucked under my windshield wiper was a small, folded piece of paper. My heart pounded. I looked around, but no one was there. With trembling hands, I grabbed the note and unfolded it. The handwriting was thin and slanted, almost elegant. "You look tired. Let me take you home." My chest tightened. A cold shiver ran down my spine, and a knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't a coincidence. He knew who I was. He knew I worked late, and worse, he knew which car was mine. I swallowed hard and looked around as if expecting to see him lurking in some dark corner. But the parking lot was empty, except for a security guard further ahead, leaning against the wall, distracted by his phone. I took a deep breath and tried to rationalize. Maybe it was just a stupid joke, someone trying to scare me. But who? I didn't have many friends at work, and I doubted anyone would waste time on this kind of prank. My heart pounded in my chest as I went back up to the office. On impulse, I went to the reception desk and showed the note to the morning shift security guard. He frowned and called the supervisor, who promised to review the cameras and patrol the parking lot more frequently. But the way he spoke, kind of indifferent, gave me the feeling that nothing would come of it. And, in fact, by the end of the day, when I asked if they had found anything, the answer was a simple, nothing suspicious. The cameras hadn't captured anyone leaving the note on my car. "It was probably someone who passed by before you arrived," the supervisor said, as if that was supposed to reassure me. But I knew that wasn't the case. He was there. I saw him every night. That night, when I left, my senses were on high alert. The parking lot felt even quieter than usual, as if it was holding its breath along with me. I gripped my keys tightly and walked straight to my car without looking to the sides. When I locked the door from the inside and started the engine, I let out a relieved sigh. But before driving off, I took one last look in the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw him. He was standing just a few meters away, looking directly at me. My muscles locked up. For a second, I couldn't breathe. He didn't move, he just watched me as if waiting to see what I would do. The car engine hummed softly, and my sweaty hand clenched the gear shift tightly. My instincts screamed at me to get out of there as fast as possible, but I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing how terrified I was. Pretend he's not there. Just leave. I swallowed hard, shifted into reverse, and slowly backed out, keeping my eyes on him through the mirror. But he didn't move. Not a single step. He just stood there, watching me drive away. That night, I locked all my doors and checked the windows at least 3 times before going to bed. My heart was still racing, and my mind was spinning in circles trying to make sense of what was happening. Who was he? What did he want? Was he following me home? Just in case, I changed my parking spot to a different floor and started leaving work earlier, even if it meant bringing work home. For 2 days, I didn't see any sign of him. I started to think maybe he was just some random lunatic who had given up. But on the 3rd night, just as I was almost convinced it was all over, I heard something that made the blood in my veins turn to ice. Footsteps. The footsteps were light but steady, echoing through the concrete parking lot as I hurried toward my car. I didn't need to turn around to know I wasn't alone. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it throbbing in my ears. The feeling of being watched took over me again, but now it was accompanied by a suffocating fear. He's here. He's coming. My fingers trembled as I fumbled through my bag for my keys. Damn it. Why do they always disappear when you need them the most? My chest tightened when the footsteps behind me suddenly stopped. The silence was worse than any sound. I had to gather my courage to turn my head, and when I finally looked back, he was there, just a few meters away. The same gray jacket, hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on me. This time, I saw his face clearly. Thin, angular, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a cold expression. He didn't say anything. He didn't move. He just stared at me, as if he was analyzing every detail of my face, of my fear. At this point, my entire body screamed at me to run, but I knew that if I did, he might run after me. So I swallowed my panic and did the only thing I could. I took another step toward my car. My hand finally found the keys inside my bag, but I knew that any sudden movement could trigger something I didn't even want to imagine. With trembling fingers, I pressed the button to unlock the car, and the sound of the lock releasing echoed through the parking lot like a deafening explosion. He still didn't move, but something in his gaze changed. It was subtle, but I noticed. He liked my fear. My stomach turned. I took a deep breath and kept walking, step by step without taking my eyes off him. Almost there. Just a few more steps. When I finally reached my car door, my hands were so sweaty that I almost dropped the key. I got in quickly, slamming the door shut, and locked everything from the inside. For a moment, I just sat there, trying to catch my breath, feeling my chest rise and fall uncontrollably. The fogged-up glass blurred part of my vision, but I could still see him standing in the same spot. Then he did something that completely froze me. He smiled. A faint smile, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Then, without any hurry, he put his hands in his pockets and started walking away, disappearing into the darkness of the parking lot, as if nothing had happened. I drove home with my nerves on edge, checking the rearview mirror every 2 seconds, convinced that he might be following me. Every pair of headlights behind me seemed suspicious. Every car that turned onto the same street made my heart race. But when I finally arrived, there was no sign of him. Still, my paranoia wouldn't let me rest. I slid the chain lock onto the door, checked the windows, and even propped a chair against the bedroom doorknob. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop. The smile. It wasn't a normal smile. It was as if he knew something I didn't. The next morning, I went straight to the building's security office and demanded to see the camera footage. The supervisor took me to the monitoring room and pulled up the recordings from the previous night. My hands were ice cold as I watched the footage from the camera overlooking my car. The elevator doors opened. I stepped out and started walking. A few seconds later, the man appeared in the corner of the screen. He was there. The supervisor fast-forwarded to the moment I got into my car. I saw him smiling. I saw him walking away. But then, my blood ran cold. He didn't leave through the parking lot exit. He simply disappeared from the camera. I stared at the screen as if my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing, or rather, what they weren't seeing. The man walked away from my car, his smile still visible in the low-quality footage. And then, nothing. He simply vanished. No other camera captured him leaving the parking lot. No strange movement anywhere nearby. The supervisor frowned, rewound the footage a few times, but the only explanation he gave me was, maybe a blind spot in the cameras. But how? There wasn't a blind spot there. He was heading toward a fully covered area. I wanted to scream, to demand that someone give me an answer. but all I managed was a nod and an awkward mumble. "Thank you." I spent the entire day restless, unable to focus on anything. My mind kept spinning, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe the cameras had glitched. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just some random lunatic who decided to scare me and had already moved on. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. When the sun began to set, a crushing weight settled on my chest. I didn't want to go back to the parking lot. The thought of going down there alone made me break into a cold sweat. So, before leaving, I asked one of the security guards to walk me to my car. He chuckled, as if I was being paranoid, but agreed. And it was the best decision I could have made. We took the elevator down together, and for the first time in days I felt relieved not to be alone in that suffocating parking lot. The guard was a tall guy, broad-shouldered, walking with the confidence of someone who had seen it all. Still, when the elevator doors opened and we took the first steps into the parking lot, I noticed he became more alert, as if something was bothering him. I looked around and everything seemed normal. My car was in the same spot, no strange movement. But even so, I could feel it. A presence, a tension in the air that shouldn't have been there. When we got close to the car, the security guard walked around it to check while I unlocked the door. "Everything looks fine, miss. I think you're just nervous about this whole thing." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But as I opened the door to get in, something made me look at the passenger side window, and that's when I saw it. A new note stuck inside the glass. From the inside, as if it had been placed while the car was locked. My entire body froze. My eyes traced the familiar handwriting and terror swallowed me whole. The note simply said, "Why did you bring someone else?" My whole body went cold. How did he put that there? How did he get into my car? I swear I had locked everything. The security guard noticed my expression and stepped closer to look at the note. As soon as he read it, his demeanor changed completely. The mocking tone vanished, replaced by obvious tension. "Are you sure you didn't leave this here before?" The question was ridiculous, but I understood. He was trying to rationalize something that simply didn't make sense. I could only shake my head, unable to form words. My chest rose and fell too fast. My vision started to darken at the edges. I needed to get out of there. Now. "Let's go back upstairs, don't get in the car," the security guard said, grabbing his radio to call for backup. But that's when we heard it. A noise behind us. A faint dragging sound coming from the back of the parking lot, from the darkest area. It was like a shoe slowly sliding over the concrete. The guard turned quickly, placing his hand on the gun at his belt, and took a step forward. "Is someone there?" The silence that followed was deafening. My heart pounded so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. And then, in the middle of the darkness, something moved. A silhouette emerged from the shadows, moving slowly, as if waiting to be noticed. It was him. The same gray jacket, the same calm posture. But now there was something different, something wrong. He wasn't just standing still like before. He looked amused, as if our reaction was exactly what he wanted. The security guard stepped forward, gripping his gun. "Hey man, you can't be here, identification now." But the man didn't answer. He didn't hesitate, he just stood there, smiling, as if he already knew what was about to happen. The guard took another step, ready to act, but that's when everything felt wrong. His eyes. I can't explain it, but for a brief moment it seemed like he wasn't really there. Like he was a reflection of something that shouldn't exist in that place. My stomach twisted. My instincts screamed for me to run. And then, as if tired of the game, he took a step back, slowly retreating into the darkness. But before he disappeared completely, I saw his lips move, forming a single word. "See you soon." The security guard drew his gun and ran toward where he had vanished, shouting orders for him to stop. But I already knew what would happen. He wouldn't be there. He never was. My body was still frozen when I heard the guard's voice echo through the parking lot. "Shit, there's no one here." He came back a few seconds later, giving me an uncertain look. "The guy's gone." I shook my head, feeling the tears start to form. "I told you, he always disappears." My voice came out weaker than I wanted. The guard ran a hand over his head, clearly uneasy. "Let's get out of here. I'll call for backup and review the cameras." We went back up to the reception and 2 more security guards were assigned to patrol the area. but I already knew it wouldn't make any difference. Just like every other time, he simply wouldn't be on the recordings. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the building's reception, refusing to leave alone. When the morning shift arrived, I took a taxi home and called to say I was taking the day off. I would never go back to that parking lot. Never again. The next day, I asked to switch to the morning shift. I refused anything that would make me leave after sunset. The fear didn't disappear, but over time, I started to believe it was over. Until 3 weeks later, I found something that made me realize the truth. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was finally starting to feel safe again. I had avoided any situation that would leave me alone in empty places, completely changed my routine. But that day, while cleaning my apartment, I found something that made my heart stop. A note. Not in the car, not in the office, in my apartment. It was neatly folded, resting on the kitchen table. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, as if the paper carried something toxic. The same slanted handwriting, the same terrifying precision. I took a deep breath and unfolded the paper, feeling my vision blur for a second. The words were simple, direct, and tore apart any illusion of security I still had. "See you soon." My whole body went cold. My legs felt weak. He had been here, inside my home, in my kitchen, while I was sleeping, while I was in the shower. There was no doubt anymore. He never just wanted to scare me. He wanted me to know. To understand that no matter where I went, he could be there. The only thing I could do now was try to move on, but with a horrible certainty clinging to my skin, he is still around, and he is still waiting. Story 2. I have always been careful with my social media. I never accepted friend requests from strangers, kept my posts private, and only added people I actually knew. By the end of 2022, I was living alone in a small but cozy apartment in the city center. My routine was ordinary: work, gym, occasional dinners with friends. Then one day, while checking my notifications, I saw a friend request from a profile with no picture and a strange name, something like user3829x. I ignored it without a second thought. The next day, the same profile sent another request. I found it odd, but still, I declined and went on with my life. In the following weeks, I started to notice something strange. Every time I posted something, whether it was a photo, a random thought, or even a story for close friends, that profile would like it within seconds. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but then I realized that even private posts, visible only to friends, received the same treatment. I didn't understand how that was possible. No one else commented or liked my posts that quickly. I tested posting something at 3 in the morning when I was sure no one would be online, and there it was. The like. Always the same one, always immediate. I tried to ignore it, but it really started to bother me. I reviewed my privacy settings, removed some people from my friends list, and even changed my passwords just to be safe. But nothing changed. The profile was still there, silent, watching. I wanted to believe it was just a bug or someone messing with me, but then on a Friday night, I received a direct message from that profile. Just one sentence. "Loved the red dress. You wore it last Friday." My heart raced. I had never posted anything about that night. I never mentioned the red dress anywhere, but I did wear it. I went to dinner with a friend and then straight home. How did this person know? In the following days, my anxiety only got worse. I started paying more attention to my surroundings when I went out, constantly looking over my shoulder. Was someone following me? I didn't want to seem paranoid, but everything felt wrong. Then, on a Tuesday morning, as I was leaving for work, I noticed something stuck to my car window, a piece of paper. As I got closer, a shiver ran down my spine. It was a printed photo of one of my selfies, a picture I had posted only on my profile with restricted access. In the bottom corner of the paper, handwritten, was a sentence that made my stomach drop. "Even more beautiful in person." My whole body tensed up. My fingers trembled as I picked up that paper, as if it were contaminated with something horrible. I looked around, trying to see if anyone was watching me, but the street was empty, just parked cars and the distant sound of a horn. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was going to explode. I threw the paper inside the car and got in quickly, locking the doors as soon as I sat down. I started the engine with sweaty hands, and got out of there as fast as I could. On the way to work, I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see a suspicious car following me, but nothing. Who was doing this? How had this person gotten my photo? I spent the entire day restless. I couldn't focus on work. My hands kept sweating. My mind spun in circles trying to find a logical explanation. During my lunch break, I went to the bathroom and checked my profile again. Nothing seemed off. No obvious signs of hacking. But then when I looked at my friend list, my stomach dropped. There was a name I didn't recognize. User 3829X. My chest tightened. I was absolutely certain I had never accepted that request. Somehow that profile was there among my friends, as if I had allowed it myself. My first instinct was to remove the account immediately. My finger hovered over the block option, but an irrational fear made me hesitate. If this person had managed to get onto my friend list without my permission, what else could they do? Instead of deleting the profile, I clicked to see more details. Nothing. No pictures, no posts, no personal information. Just that strange name and the fact that we were connected. I no longer knew if I was going crazy or if this was really happening. I closed the app and decided that night, I would change all my passwords and delete my account if necessary. But the worst was yet to come. When I got home, after an entire day of paranoia, I found my door slightly open. My heart stopped. I was certain I had locked it when I left. The apartment was dark, silent, and a strange smell lingered in the air, something between damp paper and cheap perfume. My chest rose and fell quickly as I tried to listen for any noise inside. I had the urge to run and call the police, but my body wouldn't move. Someone had been here, or was still inside. With shallow breaths and a lump in my throat, I slowly reached out to push the door open. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. At first glance, the living room looked normal, but something was wrong. My eyes scanned every corner, trying to spot anything out of place. That's when I noticed. My photos. All the printed pictures I had on the fridge and a board in my bedroom were scattered across the floor. Some had smudged fingerprints, as if someone had spent a long time holding them. Others had small tears, like someone had gripped them too tightly. My stomach turned. Whoever did this wasn't trying to steal anything. They wanted me to know they had been here. My mind screamed for me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I walked slowly to my bedroom, my hands trembling as I opened the door. Everything seemed normal, except for one detail. My laptop was open, the screen still glowing. That didn't make sense. I had left it closed when I went out. I hesitated as I stepped closer and looked at the screen. My Facebook profile page was open, but something was different. In the new post field, there was a message typed out, ready to be posted. Just 3 words, "I see you." A shiver ran down my spine like an electric shock. Someone had been here, had used my computer, and had almost posted that from my own account. I didn't know what to do first. Delete everything, call the police, or simply run away and never come back. My entire body shook as I slammed the laptop shut and took a step back, as if that would somehow protect me. If this person had managed to break into my home, my computer, my account, then nothing was safe anymore. That was the moment I heard a noise in the kitchen that froze me in place. A dry creak, as if something had just been moved. My throat went dry. My chest rose and fell rapidly, and it felt like I couldn't get air into my lungs. My instincts screamed for me to run, but my legs were heavy, as if they were rooted to the floor. With trembling fingers, I pulled my phone from my pocket and silently dialed the police. Before I could press the call button, I heard a whisper, low, raspy, coming from the dark hallway. A man's voice. "I knew you would come." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. My entire body erupted in chills, and it felt like the blood had evaporated from my veins. Someone was in there with me. I didn't know if I should run or lock myself in the bedroom, but the only thing I was sure of was that I couldn't stay still. With a desperate surge of energy, I bolted for the front door, yanking it open and nearly tripping over the entryway rug. I ran down the building's stairs without looking back, my breath catching in my chest. My only thought was, he is behind me. He is behind me. When I reached the ground floor, I pounded frantically on my neighbor's door, an elderly woman who always offered me coffee when we met in the elevator. It took me a few seconds to realize I was crying. She opened the door, startled, And before she could ask anything, I stepped inside, locking the door behind me. I explained everything in a frantic rush, my heart pounding, while she handed me a glass of water and called the police. When I finally calmed down enough to speak with the officers, a new fear hit me like a punch to the stomach. What if he was still upstairs? The minutes until the police arrived felt like an eternity. Every sound in the hallway made me hold my breath, expecting to hear footsteps coming down the stairs after me. When the officers finally arrived, they took me back to my apartment. My entire body trembled as we climbed the stairs. The moment the door was opened, the scene inside was exactly the same. Photos scattered. My laptop closed where I had left it, and nothing else. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no clues as to who had been there. The police searched everything, but the only thing they found was the printed photo that had been left on my car window. They asked if I had any suspects, someone who might be stalking me, but I had no idea. I explained about the strange profile, how it appeared on my friends list without explanation, about the disturbing messages, but without concrete evidence. They said there wasn't much they could do beyond filing a report and advising me to reinforce my security. One of them suggested installing cameras and changing the locks, and at that moment, that was all I could do. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow cast by the streetlight seemed to move. Every creak of the apartment's wood made me hold my breath. I spent hours staring at my phone screen, too afraid to open my social media. When I finally gathered the courage, I went straight to my profile to block that user once and for all. But when I searched for the name user3829X, it no longer existed. No trace that the account had ever been there. My fingers froze on the screen. Did he know I had called the police? Had he erased everything to avoid being tracked? In the following days, I installed a new lock, put an extra chain on the door, and bought a security camera. I wanted to believe it was over, but something told me it wasn't. One random afternoon while working from home, I received a new email notification. It was from an unknown address, no subject. When I opened it, there was only an image attachment. My whole body went cold. It was a photo of me. Not a profile picture, but a picture of me sitting on my living room couch taken from outside the window. My stomach churned, and the room around me seemed to spin. Someone had taken that photo while I was inside my own home. I remembered that exact moment. It was the day before, when I was working on my laptop, wearing a hoodie with my hair in a messy bun. The window was closed, the curtains were slightly open, but whoever it was, they had found a way to see me. My hands were so sweaty that my phone almost slipped from my fingers. I closed the email immediately, deleted the photo, but I couldn't do anything else except sit on the floor and try to control my breathing. It wasn't over. I called the police again, trying to explain that I now had proof, a real photo. But the operator told me, with that bureaucratic and indifferent tone, that there wasn't much they could do without a suspect or an explicit threat. They suggested I change the passwords on all my devices and take precautions. Precautions? As if a damn stalker watching my every move was something I could solve by changing a password? I hung up the phone, feeling a knot of frustration in my chest. I was alone in this. After that, my paranoia reached an unbearable level. I started checking all the locks at least 5 times before going to bed. I stopped posting anything online. No stories, no photos, nothing. I wanted to disappear from the internet, but the worst part was that I didn't know if that would make any difference, if he already knew where I lived, if he had already broken into my house once. What was stopping him from doing it again? I started sleeping with a knife next to my bed and a chair pushed against the bedroom door. I had no peace, not even in my own apartment. Then, one night, my security camera sent a notification. Motion detected, 2:43 a.m. My heart pounded. With trembling hands, I opened the app and pressed play on the video. At first, the screen only showed the entrance to my apartment, dimly lit by the street lamp, but then something moved. A shadow. Someone standing in front of my door, motionless. My chest tightened. It was impossible to see the face, but the silhouette was there, just standing, waiting, watching. And then, without warning, the figure's head tilted slowly, as if it knew I was watching. My breath caught in my throat. The figure didn't move, just stood there, its head tilted at a strange angle, as if staring at me through the camera. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. a cold fear crawling up my spine. Then, suddenly, it took a step forward. My hand flew to the phone. I dialed the police and pressed call. But before the call even connected, he turned and simply walked away, as if he knew the exact moment I was going to react, as if he was playing with me. This time, the police arrived quickly. They reviewed the footage, analyzed the recording, and for the first time, they seemed to take it seriously. They asked if I recognized the silhouette, if there was anyone in my life who might have an obsession with me. I denied everything. I had no idea who this person was. But at that moment, it became clear to me I was not safe there. The next day, I packed my bags and went to my parents' house without telling anyone except my boss. I deleted my social media, changed my number, and left my apartment behind. I never went back. It took me months to start feeling somewhat normal again. The feeling of being watched didn't disappear overnight. I avoided going out alone, constantly looked over my shoulder, and stayed away from any technology that could expose me. The idea of someone knowing where I was, what I was wearing, what I was doing, made me sick. But little by little, life went on. I started therapy, got a new job, and used a new name on social media. I convinced myself that it was all behind me, until the last message. About a year later, my phone vibrated with an email from an anonymous address. No subject, no text, just an attachment. My hands went cold as I opened the image. It was a photo of me, taken the day before. I was in the supermarket looking at a shelf of canned goods. The same fear, that ice-cold terror, returned instantly. No matter where I went, he was still watching me. At that moment, I realized that running was no longer an option. I couldn't keep living in fear, waiting for this person to just disappear. I took a deep breath, saved the photo, and went straight to the police station. This time, I wouldn't leave without answers. I demanded they analyze the image's metadata, track any possible lead. I spoke with a cybercrime investigator, and after weeks of analysis, we finally found a trace. The origin of the email led to a masked server, but the mistake this person made was a single unprotected connection, an access tied to a physical address, a rented apartment in the city center. The police acted quickly. They found a middle-aged man, reclusive, with walls covered in pictures of me. Some I had never seen before, taken from impossible angles. He had been watching me for years. My heart nearly stopped when I found out he worked in technology and had likely hacked into my accounts, accessed my cameras, tracked me without me ever noticing. He was arrested for invasion of privacy, stalking, and other cybercrimes. But even with him behind bars, the fear never completely disappeared, because now I know how easy it is for someone to slip into your life without you even realizing it. I still look over my shoulder. I still avoid social media. I still sleep with the doors locked with an alarm and new cameras. But at least now, I know he's not watching me anymore. At least, I hope he's not. Story 3. My routine at university was always the same. Classes in the morning, a part-time job in the afternoon, and at night I took the same bus home. I liked the predictability of it. I always sat by the window, put on my headphones, and watched the city pass by through the glass as the day came to an end. I never paid much attention to the other passengers. It was always a constant flow of tired faces, students, workers returning home. But over time, I started noticing a man who was there every night, sitting in the same spot, always on the right side, in the row before the last. He never interacted with anyone, never used a phone, never read anything. He just sat there, motionless, staring straight ahead. He was an older man with graying hair, thin, dressed in simple clothes, always wearing a dark jacket regardless of the weather. At first, I thought he was just a regular passenger, someone with a routine as fixed as mine. But then I noticed something strange. He never got off the bus. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe he lived near the last stop or simply enjoyed riding around the city. But as the days passed, I realized that no matter what time I took the bus, he was always there. If I left earlier, he was there. If I left later, still there. Always in the same seat, with the same blank expression, as if he were waiting for something. That started to bother me. It was as if he was part of the bus, a fixed presence that no one but me seemed to notice. One night I gathered the courage to observe him more closely. I wanted to find any sign that he was just another normal passenger, but the more I looked, the more wrong it seemed. He never blinked for too long, never moved except to slightly turn his head when the bus made a turn. And then I noticed a detail that made my blood run cold. His shoes were always clean, impeccable. Even on rainy days when everyone boarded the bus with wet feet and muddy tracks covered the floor, his remained dry, untouched. After that night, I couldn't ignore him anymore. My body reacted before my mind, and every time I stepped onto the bus, my eyes went straight to the corner where he always sat, always there, always in the same spot. And the strangest part was that no one ever seemed to interact with him. Other passengers bumped into each other, exchanged glances, chatted. But with him, nothing. It was as if no one saw him. I started noticing that no matter how crowded the bus was, no one ever sat next to him. As if there was an unspoken agreement that that space should never be occupied. The discomfort turned into real fear on a night when the bus broke down halfway through the route. The driver asked everyone to get off and wait for the next one. I grabbed my backpack and stood up, glancing quickly toward the back. The man was still sitting there. My stomach churned. Everyone was already getting off, but he didn't move. It was as if he hadn't heard the announcement. But then, as I walked past his seat in the aisle, a shiver ran up my spine. Without looking at me, without moving a muscle in his face, he murmured my name, my full name. My body froze instantly. A cold sensation spread across the back of my neck, and I felt a shiver run through every inch of my skin. How did he know my name? I had never spoken to him. I had never mentioned my name on that bus. No one there knew who I was. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I wanted to look at him. I needed to look. But when I turned my head, he was simply smiling. A small smile, almost imperceptible, but it carried something profoundly wrong. My mind screamed for me to run. I practically jumped out of the bus, stumbling over the step in my rush to get out. The fresh air had never felt so good. The other passengers were distracted, talking among themselves, while I looked back inside the vehicle, trying to understand what the hell had just happened. But when my eyes returned to the seat where he had been sitting, he was gone. The seat was empty. The man who never got off the bus, who never moved, had disappeared. My stomach twisted. It wasn't possible. I hadn't taken my eyes off him for more than 3 seconds. He wouldn't have had time to pass me, much less leave without anyone noticing. But he had simply vanished. I looked around desperately, trying to find some logical explanation. Maybe he had run to the back of the bus. Maybe he had blended in with the other passengers. But nothing made sense. The driver was still inside, but he didn't seem remotely concerned. It was as if I was the only person who had ever seen that man. That night I walked home, even knowing it would take much longer. I didn't want to take that bus anymore. My mind spun, trying to find a rational explanation, but everything led back to the same point. He knew my name, and worse, he smiled. I spent the night awake, replaying every detail. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that expressionless face, that motionless body, that presence that seemed out of place. But the worst part came the next day. When I got on the bus to go to university, trembling with nervousness, I saw something in my usual seat. A small white envelope with my name written by hand. My hands were sweating as I picked up the envelope. The paper was rough, as if it had been folded and handled multiple times before reaching me. Someone had placed it there for me. My name was written in an old-fashioned, slanted, meticulously careful handwriting. I looked around, trying to spot a suspicious glance, someone who seemed interested in what I was doing. But everyone on the bus continued with their normal routines, immersed in their own worlds. No one seemed to notice. My heart pounded in my chest as I unfolded the paper inside the envelope. There was only one sentence written in bold, dark letters. "You're going the wrong way." A chill ran through me from head to toe. What? What did that mean? What was he trying to tell me? I looked around again, feeling my stomach twist. My first instinct was to throw the note away, pretend I had never seen it. But at the same time, something stopped me. Something inside me said it was a warning. A warning about what, I didn't know. But one thing was certain. From that day on, the man on the bus never appeared again. In the following days, my anxiety only grew. Who was he? What did he mean by that note? I tried to follow my routine as normally as possible, but every time I got on the bus, I felt a knot in my stomach, expecting to see him sitting in the same spot. But he never appeared again. The seat that had once been his was always empty, as if no one dared to occupy that space. Even so, the feeling of being watched never went away. Sometimes I felt a shiver on my neck, as if someone was looking at me from somewhere in the bus, but whenever I turned my head, there was no one there. I wanted to believe that it was all over, that maybe I had exaggerated, or that he had simply gone another way. But then, a few weeks later, something happened that kept me up at night. I was organizing some notes for an exam when a piece of paper slipped out of my notebook. My heart stopped for a second. It was the same type of paper as the note I had received on the bus. The same yellowed tone, the same rough texture. But this time, there was something different. The message written on it was another. With trembling hands, I turned the paper over to read the message. The handwriting was the same as the previous note, elegant and meticulously careful. But this time the words sent a sharp chill down my spine. "You still don't understand." My chest tightened. How had that note gotten into my notebook? I had never seen it before, never put it there. This meant that someone at some point had access to my things. My notebook was with me all the time. I took it to university, to work, to my house. Someone had placed that note there without me noticing. After that, I stopped taking that bus. I changed my routine, started going home with a colleague, getting rides or choosing different routes every day. But the fear never left me. Every time I walked into a place, my mind instinctively searched for him. The man in the dark jacket, with the fixed gaze, with the silent presence. And even though he never appeared again, I still feel like he's around. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I get the feeling that something is watching me from the darkness. Maybe he's gone, or maybe he's just waiting for the right moment to come back.